Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're actually not going to be spending so much time in Minecraft itself. Today's one is a real technical one because the next update to the game, Minecraft 1.21, the Tricky Trials update, is literally arriving tomorrow when this video goes out, so we need to do some work preparing our world for the arrival of this update. And I'm not just talking about stockpiling resources that we might need or anything like that, I'm talking about preparing the world itself for the arrival of new structures. Potentially even new biomes in future updates will benefit from us knowing the skills that I'm about to show you in this episode. We're going to do a little bit of world editing. Before we start, I should give a caveat that this is only going to be relevant to Java Edition because Bedrock Edition stores the data for your world differently, but there are Bedrock Edition editors out there. I've looked into Amulet Editor in the past, and I've heard that's a decent program if you're a Bedrock or Java player, but the tool I'm looking at is a really streamlined one that works specifically for Java Edition worlds. So apologies to the Bedrock players out there, you're going to need to do a little bit of your own research if you want to take care of this in your Bedrock worlds. And why would we want to apply a world editor to this lovely world that we've done so much exploration in? Well, it's the fact that we've done that exploration is the reason actually that we want to be editing the world down some. I have explored a wide radius around my spawn area. I've gone out into the distance countless times to look for structures and various other bits and pieces around my world, and in the process of doing that, I have generated a lot of chunks of terrain. Terrain is, of course, comprised of those 16 by 16 areas, the chunks that make up a world, and once they are loaded in for the first time, once the player has visited the area, you don't even need to be in the chunk, of course, because the game will load a large area of the landscape around you, depending on your render distance and whatnot, but if the game has loaded a chunk, that chunk is saved on disk and will not be changed by anything that arrives in a future update. Minecraft does not want to overwrite anything that the player has already done, so imagine if they decided to implement a new feature in plains biomes. It's not going to appear right here around my base because I've already built here, and having some kind of new structure completely deletes some stuff that I have built in order to overwrite it with a new castle that they generated in the game or something. That'd feel kind of unfair to players who'd already spent a lot of time developing their world. Instead, the way Minecraft works is that new features will only start appearing in chunks that you have generated after the fresh update has arrived, right? So we're not going to find any of the new trial chambers that are being added in the Tricky Trials update underground in any areas we have explored. But in terms of the actual building we've done in this world, our footprint has been relatively slim. I built a couple of farms in distant biomes. We've obviously got the Guardian farm out in the ocean, and there's a mob farm back at spawn. We have our tree farm here and my base area here, and I've explored things like desert temples, shifted some sand around in the deserts and that kind of thing, but realistically, we have not built in every chunk that we have explored. In fact, we've probably only built in about 1% of the chunks that we've explored. But in the process of exploration, we have uncovered a lot more chunks, and those are chunks that trial chambers could be generated in, except we've removed that possibility because we've loaded the chunk in an earlier version. Well, if we haven't built anything there's no problem with just deleting that chunk and allowing it to regenerate in a new version to allow for new structures and whatnot to generate there. So today, we're going to be logging out of Minecraft, and we're going to be opening a player-created tool designed to help you edit your Minecraft world. The first thing we are going to do before we even leave the Minecraft client is go into my single player menu here, click on edit, and we're going to make a backup of the world. Now, this is going to freeze my computer for a little bit because it takes a little while to back up a world, so if it seems like Minecraft is not responding for a minute, don't worry about it. That just means the world has got a little larger on disk and your computer is taking its time to make sure everything is backed up safely. There we go, we've backed up the world and it is nearly 3 gigabytes on disk, which it really doesn't need to be. And that's another reason you might want to look into editing worlds like this, is to keep the file size down. Minecraft worlds can be incredibly large. You can get a pretty expansive world that will take up gigabytes and gigabytes of storage, which might be fine on your own hard disk, but if you want to distribute it to your friends or people online as a world download, you're going to want to keep the file size down so that people have an easier time downloading it it with a weaker connection. And so that's yet another reason why editing your world down is going to be a valuable skill to learn. At this point, now we've made a backup, we know where our backups folder is. If you're unsure about that, you can click on edit here and open backups folder, and your file system will launch it for you. But we can now quit Minecraft entirely. We're going to go and download a tool called MCA Selector, and we can get started editing our world. Okay, here in our web browser is the tool we're looking for. This is MCA Selector by Querz. I will have a link to this page in the video description, and you don't need to worry about the stuff at the top here. This is all just kind of GitHub stuff. Down here with the README section is really where you want to be. So as it says here, this is an external tool for exporting or deleting selected chunks and regions from a world save of Minecraft Java Edition. But that is kind of underselling it. This is a really, really valuable tool because it has a set of filters. You can have it select any chunks above or below a certain coordinate in your world. So if you want to delete everything east of a certain coordinate or north of a certain coordinate, you can filter stuff like that. But one of the most valuable features I find that it has is a way of selecting chunks based on how much time you have spent there. We're going to click on this link here to download the latest version. I'm on Windows, so I can just choose the Windows installer. And down here at the bottom of the page, take note of the fact that it currently supports versions from 1.2 all the way to 1.20.6, which is the version that I'm using right now. Once Minecraft 1.21 comes out, it's worth bearing in mind that MCA Selector will not be compatible with your world until Querz does a little bit of work to update it to support the latest versions. So this is something that you will want to do before you update your world to 1.21. If you've already taken the step of updating your world to Minecraft 1.21, you won't be able to use this tool until Querz has come here and updated it. So bear that in mind. You can probably still explore your world and you might find a few trial chambers, but if you want to be really comprehensive about it and edit down your world file size a little bit, then you might want to come back here and check in regularly to see if it's been updated for Minecraft 1.21. You'll also notice that the Minecraft Survival Guide has covered this tool a couple of different times, both for preparing for the Nether update in 1.16 and resetting the end dimension, and we'll talk about the end dimension briefly later in this video. But for now, you'll want to install the program, open up MCA Selector, and you'll be given a view like this. The first thing you'll want to do is go to File, Open World, and find your Minecraft saves folder. On Windows, by default, it's very easy to find. You just need to type %appdata% into the search field here. It will come up with the appdata roaming folder for your username, and right at the top of this folder you'll find the .minecraft folder. Open that, open saves, and we've got the Minecraft Survival Guide 3 world folder right here. We're going to open that up and we're going to click select folder. And from here, it's going to give us an option of 3 dimensions to load. Minecraft Survival Guide 3 is the world name, and that should be what the overworld is called. You'll also notice dim-1 and dim1 here. That's basically the nether and the end dimensions. We'll get onto those a little bit later. The first thing we're going to do is open up the overworld. This is the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 3 world. And at the bottom of the screen, in the bottom left-hand corner, which might be kind of difficult to see on smaller screens because I have a very large monitor, it'll show me the coordinates of the block that my mouse is currently hovering over. It will also show me the chunk coordinates, and it will show me the region coordinates. If I zoom in a little bit, I should be able to find our home settlement. Yep, there it is, with that plus shape of my storage build, and if I hover over this, the block coordinates say they're about -700, -150. That's roughly where I've set up my home base. Spawn is over here, as you can tell from the iron farm right there and the mob farm over here, and the actual 0, point of my world is actually about here. This is the central point of the world. It's slightly in an ocean biome, which is how come we spawned on shore over here. Now, as we zoom out from this area, you'll notice that there's a vast amount of this world that I have not even touched in terms of building and modifying blocks at all. You can see down here, the Guardian farm is right there, so that's definitely something we paid a lot of attention to. The offshoots of our world that go out in this direction, there's a lot of travel west. That is me searching for the woodland mansions that we've discovered, and you can see the burned out husk of this woodland mansion right here. That's the one that burned down that we rescued the allays from. And of course, we knew that there was one directly north of that as well, so we've gone all the way up to here, and somewhere on the far reaches of this stretch, there we go. We have our second woodland mansion up there surrounded by that village. in the taiga biome. But naturally, we've done a lot of traveling to reach those two structures, and along the way we found a lot of biomes and just flown directly over them. Basically, all of the chunks that you see loaded in between these are just my travel back and forth to the center of my world. Naturally, we've done a bit more work over at the Mushroom Island, because that's where our slime farm is, and you can see the chunk that's been dug out to build the slime farm right there. But I think you get the picture. There is an absolute ton of stuff in this world that we have not even touched, and it does not matter whether or not it gets deleted from the world as we go through the process of editing. Now, if you're looking at the world in this bigger picture format, if you're scrolled all the way out, you'll notice there's a grid overlaid over the entire thing, and if you left-click, you'll actually highlight that grid in orange. You can remove the selection by right-clicking. I'm moving around by using the mouse scroll wheel, clicking and holding that, and of course you can zoom in and out using the mouse scroll wheel as well. If you zoom in a little bit further, you'll start selecting things chunk by chunk, like so. And once again, you can clear the selection by clicking on these individually, right-clicking, or you can click and drag over a section, both by left-clicking and right-clicking, to select or deselect it. And this naturally allows you to be incredibly precise about the area that you want to remove. You're not going to be able to get down to the scale where you're removing individual blocks, but if there's a certain 3x3 chunk area, for example, that you want to remove from your world, we can simply highlight that. And then if we click on the selection menu up here and choose delete selected chunks or hit Ctrl D, those chunks will be removed from our world files. Now, it's important to note that this does not mean we're going to log back in and find a massive hole to bedrock there. It's simply going to delete the world save file for that area. And what that means is that when you load back into Minecraft, it's going to regenerate the terrain that was there when you first loaded it up. That might be a problem though, because there might be some stuff buried underneath the surface, and that's why up here in the top right hand corner there is an elevation slider which defaults to the highest point in the world at Y319, so it's going to show you the maximum possible height that you could have built anything. But if we scroll that down slightly, let's bring it down to something like -2, for example. Yep, there we go. That's going to start showing us the cave layers, all of the pockets of ores and caves and stuff underneath here. And the reason I'm doing this is because somewhere around -30 or so, we're going to start spotting things like amethyst geodes. And I believe this spot here, where you see this very square patch of water, I'm fairly certain that is the amethyst geode farm that we set up down there. That's the thing that allows us to harvest amethyst shards and have them float up to the surface. Seems like a very square patch of water otherwise. And so if we bring the terrain back up to the surface, once it starts generating the land masses again, there we go. That is roughly around that area. So that's an area we would want to avoid deleting because we know we've spent some time there. But that's where MCA Selector's incredible filters come in. We're going to go to Tool, Filter Chunks, or hit Ctrl F, and that's going to bring up a dialog box that will give you a query that you can run, and that's going to allow you to choose from a lot of different parameters. We can add one here, and this is going to show you a great deal of different options. You can filter by biome, for example, if you want to. So let's just ask the program to select plains biomes by typing Minecraft:plains, like so. If we now hit OK, that's going to run a filter which will take a little while because it's seeking out and selecting all of the plains biomes in the world. And after a while, if we zoom out, we can take a look at the overview of plains biomes in the area of the world that we have generated, and it's overlaid on top of the biome map. And it kind of looks like you've scribbled over the entire map in MS Paint, but what it's actually done is highlight every plains biome we know about, and probably even some we don't know about that I just ignored as I flew over them. So let's go back to our example from earlier and say that Minecraft is planning on generating a new castle structure in plains biomes. Doing this would highlight every plains biome in the world and allow you to delete it to create maximum opportunities for that plains biome to generate a castle next time you visited it. However, of course, that is going to, unfortunately, delete all of the stuff we built in plains biomes around here. So if we wanted to, we could simply hold down right-click and deselect an area of the world here. That's where we know we've built a ton of stuff that we do not want to delete. And for the record, if you're deleting a chunk of the world, you're deleting the entire thing from bedrock to build height. So it isn't really possible to edit the world using this program, at least, and just remove the terrain below a certain elevation. It's going to delete the entire chunk's worth of data. So if we deleted some area around our flying shipwreck, for example, then that's going to delete the entire thing, including the floating island, even though we built that above the terrain. And remember, if you scroll out a little bit in the grid changes here, you can actually select or deselect entire regions of the world, which are 16 by 16 chunk areas. They're effectively what fits on, I think, the 1:4 scale map. But let's say I didn't want to lose this massive plains biome that's adjacent to the mushroom island where we have the slime farm. I can simply scroll out a little bit and then hold down right click to deselect those regions. And obviously for our needs today, this is going to be a little bit impractical, but in future you might want to delete everything from specific biomes, so just so you know, that's how you do it. If you want to clear the selection, simply go up to selection in the menu and hit clear, or hit Control L. That's not going to delete anything, that's just going to clear anything you have selected. Now let's go back to the tools, let's go to filter chunks, and then let's change this filter to the one we're actually going to be using today, because if we scroll down here, inhabited time is a very useful value to know about. The game keeps track behind the scenes of how long you've spent in a specific chunk of your world. And so if we set this to inhabited time less than 5 minutes, like so, 5 min is how you'd write that out, we can hit OK, and now the game will select all of the chunks that we have spent less than 5 minutes worth of our time in. Once again, this is going to take a little while. It will take even longer if you have a larger, more developed world, but as it selects all of these regions, you can see that we have spent very little time in a lot of the regions over here to the west. We spent a little bit of time in a few chunks here and there over to the east, but the center of our world there is where the bulk of our activity has taken place. And now that's done filtering, if we zoom in, you'll notice, of course, that it skipped over a lot of the stuff around the spawn area because it knows that we've spent the most time there. Over here, it's kept this meadow biome relatively free because it knows I've been underneath there caving a lot, and also that our geode farm is there. You'll notice that there's a few chunks here and there which we haven't spent a whole lot of time in despite building relatively nearby, because it's still tracking how long you've spent within the individual 16 by 16 block area of that world. But naturally, if you're building something in an area, if you're building a farm, or if you're digging out an area, if you've got a large mining project there, chances are you've spent more than 5 minutes in all of the chunks in that area. We could also scroll the elevation slider down to something like -57 or 58, because that's where I know that I have done some branch mining in the past. And as we scroll over here, you'll be able to see that yes, I have a branch mine shaft going through there, and I have one going up this way as well, leading to a bunch of tunnels out there to the east and west. And it's cut off a couple of areas of that, so if I ended up deleting the selection that it's made now, it would actually delete sections of this tunnel, which I could obviously dig through if I went there again, but to me it feels a little bit strange to have this section of a branch mine that just cuts off and then continues. So that's the kind of thing that I would probably want to deselect if I was being really meticulous about saving all of my progress here. Of course, the main thing I'm concerned with is the stuff that I built, the stuff that appears on the surface, where you can see, because I've spent many hours building and setting up farms and projects in this world, our storage system, the starter houses, the tree farm over here, the factory there, the bamboo farm, the fisherman's hut, all of that stuff is preserved from this selection. It's not like we're going to get vital stuff deleted if we're going to end up deleting this selection that we've already made. You'll notice down here that the Guardian farm is safe, and this also doesn't allow us to cheat by deleting stuff like the desert temple that we visited and have that regenerate, because as you can see down here, those structures there are clearly the desert temple, and this black blob just above it, I'm pretty sure, is my nether portal that leads out to that region. There's also substantial portions of the village here that would not be reset, although I haven't really made any modifications to that village, so it wouldn't matter either way. Going all the way out to the west over here, of course, it would preserve the fact that we've done a lot to that woodland mansion, so it wouldn't completely regenerate the structure unless we wanted it to. You could make a selection over that. That would delete the woodland mansion structure and allow it to regenerate, although I'm not going to worry about doing that because it's just going to burn down again. I've spent a decent amount of time mining the packed ice and ice flows around here in this frozen ocean biome, and of course around the Mushroom Island there's been plenty of activity there. So what I'm really doing right here is a bit of visual confirmation to make sure I'm not deleting any important landmarks of my world that I wanted to return to later. Likewise up here we've got the trail ruins excavation. and that's completely uncovered as well. There's some stuff like that that I would really want to preserve long term. And around here, I think this swamp section is loaded simply because I spent a lot of time there working with frogs initially when I was trying to breed them. The main thing I think I want to do, and this is mainly to avoid issues like we saw earlier where part of my branch mine was cut off and some areas that I'd modified I'd actually spent less than 5 minutes just digging through from one side of the chunk to the other. What we're going to do is find the 0, point of the world. That's the spawn point right there in the center of this cross. We are going to deselect the chunks immediately around that, and I think what I will probably do, since the Guardian farm is out there as well, is leave a 4x4 area deselected, and so this represents an area of effectively 64 by 64 chunks centered on the 0, coordinate, which we're not going to delete when we do this massive selection of the world. That way we can guarantee that everything I've done in my starter area stays preserved. We can also guarantee that no trial chambers are going to generate in this area, so we're going to have to go further afield in order to track down a trial chamber once Minecraft 1.21 launches. In most other cases though, I am pretty happy with deleting everything else from this world, because so many of these chunks are simply terrain that I have flown over without ever interacting with anything there. So what we're going to do is go to selection, we're going to delete selected chunks, and it tells me that I'm about to delete 448,097 chunks from this world. Naturally, it's going to ask me if I'm sure, and I'm going to hit yes. Then the map is going to reload, and it's going to look very different, because of course the game now has no record of any of the terrain between this little area that we've started out in and all of the other landmarks of this world, but it will regenerate all of the terrain exactly as it was. Let's quickly hop back into the Minecraft Survival Guide world and prove that. I've clearly deleted an area behind where our Cherry Mountain is, so I should be able to fly over the mountain, and if this were fully deleted and the terrain was completely gone, there would be a lot of massive holes to bedrock or something there. But instead, the game is simply going to regenerate that terrain as though we're exploring it for the very first time. Here we are, back in the Minecraft Survival Guide world. It looks like everything has been preserved. Our dogs are here, the storage system is here, basically everything that we had before is present. But now, we'll fly over the mountain, and you'll notice performance might take a little bit of a dip, because what it's actually doing is generating new chunks in the distance. You can see the ocean loading in chunk by chunk there, and as you can see, a couple of bits and pieces will load a little smoother, but it's generating those chunks as though it were for the very first time. The terrain is still there though, no holes to bedrock for us, everything seems to have been deleted correctly and simply restored whenever we return to that area of the world. And now, back here in MCA Selector, you'll notice that this region of the world seems a little bit more organically explored, right? The edges are all smoothed off, there's none of this kind of patchy area where we've clearly deleted a few chunks and saved a few chunks. That's not only been a successful way to edit the world, it's also reduced our file size pretty dramatically. You can see here that our size on disk is now only barely over a gigabyte, where previously it was getting close to 3 gigabytes. So that's a little bit more manageable in terms of file size too, but there's another way we can decrease the file size even more if you want to, and that is by going to the File menu, clicking Open Dimension, and starting with dim -1, and this is going to load up the Nether. If it's your first time using MCA Selector to look at the Nether, it might look like this instead, and you might be kind of confused by why this is just grey with a couple of strange little patches of material. You're actually looking at the Nether roof, because the elevation slider defaults to the highest possible value, which is 319, and that's going to be looking down at the Nether roof from above. All the little patches of red and brown you see there, those are clusters of mushrooms growing on the bedrock of the Nether roof. So you want to make sure that this is down below at least Y128, because that's where you're going to start seeing the Nether ceiling. And if you want a better look at the topography of the Nether, you're probably better off closer to something like 64, which is going to be roughly sea level in the overworld, but is going to show you a decent proportion of the structures that you've already found, the Nether fortresses, the bastions, and potentially even some spots where you built a Nether portal. Of course, in any world, you're probably going to have explored the overworld a lot more than you have explored the Nether, but in this world, I've genuinely explored the Nether quite substantially. There are blocks over here as far out as 3,000 on the x-axis, and over here as far as -2,000. So about a 5,000 block span of the Nether has been explored here. That's a pretty substantial chunk. Now, obviously, the Nether is a cavern, so changing elevation is going to be quite important here to reveal some aspects of the terrain that aren't visible if you're looking at it at a different elevation. But what we can see here is that that is my Wither Skeleton farm. That's the platform that I've cannibalized from a Nether fortress, and that's all brown right there because it's covered in buttons. If you wanted to do the same thing with the Nether as you did in the overworld, it's perfectly reasonable to run the same filter. And the filter will even be saved here, so we can hit OK, and it's going to filter out all of the chunks that I've spent less than 5 minutes in, which of course in the Nether is a great deal of it, because I was probably just flying around looking for bastions for those videos where I cover them. Or alternatively, I could have established a Nether portal in a far-flung region of the world that would allow me to get home with, say, some allays that I was transporting back from the Woodland Mansion. So if we wanted to, at this stage, we could choose to delete selected chunks. That would delete another 73,000 chunks from the world, so we can do that if we want to. In this case, however, I'm probably not going to. And the main reason for that is pretty simple, really. The Nether is not affected by the Tricky Trials update, and the main reason I want to edit my world today is so that we can generate new terrain in the overworld that is going to generate trial chambers. You won't find those spawning in the Nether, so we're not going to worry too much about editing the Nether today. If you're doing some world administration, though, if you simply want to cut down on file size so you can provide a world download to your server mates, or if you wanted to cut out some of the areas of this that felt like they were redundant in your world, if you wanted to regenerate a structure, including all of the loot that that structure would generate, all of that is possible simply by deleting the chunks that that structure exists in. Minecraft's world seed system is robust enough that it will probably even generate warped and crimson trees in the same place if your nearby warped and crimson forests get deleted and regenerated. So let's move on to the last dimension from the open dimension menu here. Dim 1 is the End. As you can see right here, this is the central End Island. Actually kind of looks like a dragon a little bit now that I think of it, which is kind of cool. It's like a dragon emerging from a rock or an egg or something. But either way, you'll notice that right here, this little cluster of pixels down here and this cluster of pixels there are the end gateways that I have generated that lead to the outer islands. And interestingly enough, if you draw a straight line from the central bedrock portal through that end gateway and then you bring your point of view over here, we're probably going to find that yes, there is a corresponding cluster of grey pixels there that indicates the end point of that gateway. We can do the same thing for the second gateway. We'll kind of draw a line up through it this way, and if we follow that up this way, we should find that somewhere around here, yep, there it is, there is our second gateway nestled right on the edge of this island, and those brown dots that you can see there are probably the torches I have laid to mark out a path as I explore through the outer reaches of the End Islands, and that's led to where we found our first End City with a ship and gotten our first Elytra. Now, it is common for the End Dimension to be a very heavily explored one. There's a lot of valuable stuff here and a lot of space that you can effectively fly over to get to the valuable stuff once you have an Elytra of your own. So players are going to go around exploring these End Cities. They're going to raid them for Elytra and shulkers so they can get shulker boxes, and eventually you'll find that a lot of the nearby terrain in the End has been explored, especially on a multiplayer server. In this case, because I'm in a single-player world and I've only generated a couple of gateways, I haven't explored the End that extensively, and you'll find that the eastern side of the End is completely unexplored because I haven't really traveled very far that way. I have, however, traveled extensively north and south, so the End Dimension is looking pretty long. If we end up filtering these chunks for inhabited time, a lot of it is going to get filtered out, but that's going to wring out all of the End cities that we've raided, because it typically takes more than 5 minutes to raid the structure of an End city. If you're lucky, it will also keep any of the areas where you've loaded an End gateway portal, but this is something to be very careful about if you decide to reset the chunks of your End. If we traveled through this End gateway here and we made it out to this island, but we had deleted the area in which the corresponding gateway was placed, we might just end up falling onto the terrain around here. We wouldn't be able to get back through this gateway because it would not generate a new one, and in some cases you might even fall into the void, because if there isn't a proper terrain platform underneath this portal, it can just drop you off in the middle of nowhere and you'll probably fall into the void shortly afterwards. So if you choose to select a large amount of the End Dimension, I recommend going through and making sure that any areas which feature these End gateways are deselected, so they will not be deleted when you choose to delete the chunks. And in the case of this gateway right here, if we head on down to this island, you'll notice I didn't really stick around for very long once we stepped through this gateway. In fact, I probably just flew away with the elytra that I already had, and so that gateway there was selected, which means that if I went through the corresponding gateway on the central end island, I'd probably end up somewhere I didn't want to be. If we end up clearing the end dimension, I'm also going to make sure that the entirety of that end island is deselected, along with anything I've built adjacent to it, like the Enderman farm right here. I really don't want to lose anything about this central structure if I've modified it in any way, but then I'm going to go ahead and highlight any end cities that I've been to out in the extreme reaches of the end dimension, because resetting those is going to allow me a chance to go and get shulker boxes from them again, where I've killed all of the shulkers that were in the city before that. And if we delete the selected chunks from here, we're about to delete 204,000 chunks from the world, so that's almost 3 times the amount of terrain we've generated in the Nether, which is kind of baffling. But of course, the end islands are pretty expansive, and we've generated a lot of them just on the way to some of the end structures. Once again, I am not actually going to do this for my world today, because we're not expecting any new stuff for 1.21 to generate out in the end islands, and there are clearly a bunch of areas to the north, south, and the east that I haven't really explored extensively. But removing the chunks of the end can also help contribute to the file size for world downloads, so that's another thing to bear in mind if you want to remove large portions of the end where nobody has really been out here building anything yet. The last thing we're going to do is return to the overworld, and I'm actually going to deliberately delete some stuff from my world just to show you the consequences of what we're doing here. Let's take, for example, my beloved floating island project. I'm going to delete about half of that and simply allow the program to do that. And this is why we took a backup before we did it, because I want to show you the consequences of deleting chunks like this. As you can see, now having done that, there are blank chunks here next to half of my shipwreck, and this has actually edited the active Minecraft world that I would load up if I went to the Minecraft launcher right now. We're not editing the backup, we are editing the version that's on disk. So now if I load up the Minecraft survival guide world, yes, all of the structures here at spawn are going to be in the same place. However, when I fly over the hill, it's going to look ever so slightly different. Yep. Half of my ship is gone. So naturally, this would be a bit of a disaster. And one of the cooler things, actually, is that Minecraft has gone ahead and filled in that section there with terrain. Minecraft has seen that there is a large flat surface and has filled it in with some materials that you might expect to find in an area like that. If we fly inside of here, though, you'll notice that yes, there is a big open space inside of here, so that's kind of how we constructed it in the first place. And vitally, of course, those chunks are missing because we deleted them, and that would be kind of a shame for a project as fun as this. So at this point, we're going to load this world from a backup, and I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I delete all of the chunks that I know I have not spent more than 5 minutes in. Of course, in order to do that, we're going to open the backups folder. This will load it up on disk. We're going to find the most recent Minecraft Survival Guide backup, which is this one. Inside that, you'll find a Minecraft Survival Guide 3 file folder. We're going to delete the Minecraft Survival Guide 3 folder from my saves folder and replace it with this one. And now we've replaced that folder in our Minecraft saves folder, you'll see that the rear end of the ship is back. Made a pretty cool thumbnail though, didn't it? As we scroll out here, you'll see that there are some sections of the world that are still loading in, and some of them might still look like they have been edited, but MCA Selector caches data on this so that the program can load a little bit faster. If you want to make sure that none of that has happened, you simply need to go to View, Clear Cache, or Clear All Cache, and it will reload the world entirely from scratch in this program, making sure that it's not overlaying with any previous edits you've made to a version of this world. So our full world has been restored from the backup. It once again looks like an anglerfish frying an egg, which I think is what somebody said about it on Twitter. I think it looks pretty funny. Either way, we're going to do that same filter where we filter out anything that's been inhabited for less than 5 minutes. You can adjust the time if you want to as well, if you want something that's been inhabited for less than 2 minutes to be a little bit more precise about some chunks you've spent a little less time in, then that's perfectly understandable. But I think 5 minutes is a good benchmark. We're going to select all of those, deselect the area around spawn once again, and we're going to delete those chunks from the world so they can generate in 1.21. And the next time we load up the world, the ship is definitely back, and a few of the chunks have now been pruned out of the world and are ready for new adventures. But folks, that is where we're going to wrap up this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. The next episode will be our first from the Tricky Trials update, Minecraft 1.21, and I cannot wait. I'm really looking forward to it. Let me know if you are as well in the comments. Before you go, don't forget to leave a like on this episode for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name has been Pixlriffs, Pixlriffs, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.